Good evening, friends. Good evening, parishioners, brothers and sisters, viewers, guests, everybody. I want to take this opportunity, since we didn't meet for a long time, since before Nativity, I like to greet everybody with the feasts of Nativity and the feast of Theophany that we celebrated, and wish, and the new year, and wish that everybody will be healthy. I wish you the light of Christ to shine throughout your life, and that we all will be attempting to be better. That this year we will dedicate our lives to Christ and His labors, and we will learn a lesson of the previous year, that there's certain things, spiritual things of this in this life we cannot take for granted, because with God in our lives we are always stronger. So I wish all of us to be strong and to let God be in our hearts, and let Him rule our lives, and that we will be obedient to His divine will. Dear friends, again, welcome to our first episode of Pastoral Talks from Holy Virgin Mary Russian Orthodox Cathedral here in Los Angeles and Hollywood. It's the first episode of 2021, year 2021, and I want to welcome everybody, and we will start this year with looking into life of Saint Tikhon, Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, and who is very special saint for us in North America, because for a long time he was archpastor here, and but before we will start this, I like to encourage you to ask questions. If your questions are not connected to presentation, you can even send it right now to my cell phone, which is 818-213-7176, or to my email, rector@hvmla.org, or you can ask right on a YouTube channel, on the chat there, and Father Deacon, who is our operator, will pass it on to me. Yeah, please don't hesitate. I mean, it makes our program more interesting for other people to watch if it's interactive, rather than just one person is talking at you, so we can have a discussion or dialogue. So, but now let's go back to our topic. Saint Tikhon, Patriarch of Moscow and Apostle to America, as we officially remember him in our liturgical services, was born in Russia as Vasily Ivanovich Belavin. He was born on January 19th, 1865 in the family of Ivan Belavin, who was a priest in a rural Russian district near of a Pskov diocese, and served in a village. And Father John or Father Ivan had three sons, and all of them grew up in a small village in a kind of direct contact with people of like peasants. They helped to labor these people to work in fields and to from the early years, Saint Tikhon was displaying his real piety, real faith in a love to church and faith in God. He was very meek kind of young man and with a deep humility. When he was still a boy, his father had a vision of his Saint Tikhon's grandmother coming, who was deceased at that time already. She came to Father Ioan in a dream, and in this dream she foretold to him his imminent death and the fate of his three sons. She said that one of his sons would be really unfortunate throughout his entire life. The other will die in a very young age, and the third one, Vasily, would become a great man. And as now looking back into history, we can say that prophecy of grandmother was really accurate in regard to all three of the brothers. Saint Tikhon studied in the Pskov Theological Seminary, where he was accepted in 1878, and he graduated it in 1883. The really modest seminarian was really tender-hearted and of good nature, so he was loved by all of his classmates. He was loved to that point that his classmates always knew that they can come and count on his help in preparing for exams, in the preparation for different tests, and to offer his assistance, to receive his assistance. Vasily was, he had a nickname. He had two nicknames, and if you guess, his one name was Bishop, and his other name was a Patriarch. That was how his classmates called him. Obviously, it was also prophetic, because eventually he became both. He became a bishop and a patriarch. In 1888, at the age of 23, future saint graduated from the St. Petersburg Theological Academy. He was still a layman and was assigned to go back to Pskov, the district where his father used to serve, as a lay instructor of moral theology and dogmatic theology. The whole seminary, and in fact the whole town, was really happy and fond of him. They really liked when he came back, and everybody was rejoicing when in 1981, after becoming of after reaching age of 26 years of age, he received the monastic vows. Nearly the whole town gathered for the ceremony, and they were really, church was filled, and everybody was rejoicing as the meek and humble young man was given the name of Tikhon in honor of Saint Tikhon of Zadonsk. He was shortly after that he was transferred, as usually clergy like it happens in the clergy life, that we serve God where it's needed. So he was transferred from the Pskov seminary to the Holm theological seminary just year after his transfer into monastic orders. And Holm, it is a city in modern Poland. It's you know, at that time it was part of Russian Empire, and he was teaching in the seminary there, but already in a rank of archimandrite. Archimandrite is a equivalent to the proto-presbyter, or it's a kind of highest award for, in the Russian church, it's the highest award for the monastic clergy, for priest. Usually in a Russian tradition, it's either priest of some kind of really important position, or administrative position, or it's would be a abbot of the monastery. Archimandrite Tikhon was shortly, in 5 years, he was consecrated as a bishop of Lublin, and he eventually returned to the city of Holm as an auxiliary bishop to the diocese of Holm. So he served there for several years, and really as a bishop, and really took a good care of his flock, but developing the Lublin Vicariate into right now in modern days it is a diocese of Lublin and Holm, and but those days it was basically diocese of Holm was vicariate in Lublin. He was really attracting people with his moral kind of attitude. He loved people, and the people were attracted to him, not only Russian people, but even Lithuanians and Polish people that in most of the mostly they're Catholics, but they were really attracted to his nature and his love to God and church and to people. He ministered to all nations and nationalities that lived there, because it's not too far from modern borders of modern Ukraine. It's not too far from Belarus, modern Belarus. So all of this ethnicities were present in that area, and Bishop Tikhon ministered to all of them without any exception. On September 14th of 1898, which is just a year later, Bishop Tikhon was given another assignment. He was assigned as a bishop of Aleutian Islands and Alaska. As the head of Orthodox Church in America, he was a really zealous laborer in the Lord's vineyard. He did much to promote the spread of orthodoxy and to improve his diocese. He recognized that the diocesan redesigned and reorganized the diocesan structures and changed the name of the diocese to the Diocese of Aleutians, and from the Diocese of Aleutians and Alaska to Diocese of Aleutians and North America, which was effective in 1900. So the new century was marked with the beginning of this mission, massive mission, not only to Alaska, but throughout the rest of the North America. Both clergy and laity loved their archpastor and held him in such esteem that the Americans made Archbishop Tikhon an honorary citizen of the United States. On May 22, 1901, he blessed the cornerstone for the St. Nicholas Cathedral in New York, and was also involved in establishment of other numerous churches. In 1902, he consecrated the Church of St. Nicholas in Brooklyn for the Syrian Orthodox immigrants. And 2 weeks later, he consecrated St. Nicholas Cathedral in New York. So within a year, cathedral was built. In 1905, the American mission was made an archdiocese, and St. Tikhon was elevated to the rank of archbishop. He had two auxiliary bishops. One was Bishop Innocent, who served in Alaska, and second one was Bishop Raphael Hawawiwi, who eventually became a Saint Raphael of Brooklyn, that we commemorate again as one of our saint hierarchs. This saints assisted here, this auxiliary bishop, they assisted Saint Tikhon in his ministry. One, as I mentioned, in Alaska, and Bishop Raphael, who studied in St. Petersburg, who studied in Kiev, and who spoke many languages. He assisted St. Tikhon with his outreach to different kind of immigrants and ethnical groups. In June of 1905, St. Tikhon gave his blessing to establish St. Tikhon monastery in Pennsylvania, and that's this monastery you might remember. We remembered in our talk about Saint Alexis Thoth, as his relics rest in the church of the monastery, and this is where consecration of Saint Alexis took place as well. And also that was a place where Saint Nicholas of Zhicha used to be a professor until he passed on. In 1907, Saint Tikhon was recalled back to Russia, and he was given an appointment to be a diocesan bishop of Diocese of Yaroslavl, where he again quickly won the affection of his flock and became a beloved archpastor. People remembered that he spoke in a very meek and simple way to everybody. Even to his subordinates, he never raised his voice, and even when he had to discipline somebody, and that happens not only in a bishop's life, but even in a anybody's life that is charged with some kind of a task. He did it in a very gentle way, not to offend person, not to, but rather to help person correct himself. Kind of, he did it with a sometimes in a joke kind of a matter, and the people usually got a message, and it's affected them much more, much in a much more effective way. When Saint Tikhon was transferred later on to Lithuania on December 22, 1913, which is kind of 6 years after his move back to Russia, the people of Yaroslav actually voted him to be a honorary citizen of the city. After transfer to Lithuania, he resided in a city of Vilnius. That's exactly where he was when First World War began. These years were specifically hard in his life. World War I broke out when His Eminence was serving in Lithuania. And it spread throughout the Russian Empire, and his main task was to assist people in his flock who were affected by the war. People who lost their homes, people who lost their close ones, and people who were hungry and in the street. But shortly, as we know in history, shortly 3 years after beginning of the war, in February, Russian revolt began, and Saint Tikhon was appointed as a member of the Holy Synod. Because new synod was formed. Just to explain what happened, that going back into history, Tsar Peter I, he eliminated the Patriarchy. The Church of Russian Church was not headed by Patriarch anymore. It was headed by secular. It became the office of the state, and was headed by the Oblprokuror, or it was a kind of a secular individual who was in charge, and of a kind of a council of bishops. So the task of the Russian Church was, for last those centuries, was to kind of return back to from synodal rule of the church to the hierarchical, to patriarchal rule of the church. So the council was in the progress to be called, but on August 15, 1917, in June 21, 1917, the Moscow Diocesan Congress of Clergy and Laity elected Archbishop Tikhon as their ruling bishop. So he became the ruling bishop for city of Moscow. On August 15, 1917, the local council was opened in Moscow, and Archbishop Tikhon was raised to the dignity of metropolitan. And then he was elected as a chairperson of the council. The council has as its aim to restore the life of Russian Orthodox Church to strictly canonical principles that, as I mentioned, were broken by Tsar Peter the First. And its primary concern was the restoration of Patriarchy. All the council members would select 3 candidates, and then a lot would reveal the will of God. The council members chose 3 candidates, out of whom it was Archbishop Anthony Khrapovitsky of Kharkov, and he was probably in those days most educated hierarch of the Russian Church. Metropolitan Anthony, eventually Metropolitan, but at that time Archbishop Anthony, he wrote several books, and you probably, some of you familiar with his work. It's on confession. It's a very interesting book that is offered in our bookstore. Then other hierarch was Archbishop Arseny of Novgorod, who had a reputation of being a strictest out of all hierarchs in the Russian Church. And the third was Metropolitan Tikhon of Moscow, who had a reputation as a kindest bishop of Russian Church. The very name Tikhon comes from the Russian word quiet, Tikhi, and he was meek indeed, and people loved him. On November 5th, following the Divine Liturgy and the Malaban in the Cathedral of Christ the Savior, the elderly monk kind of picked a name out of the vessel, and out of 3 ballots that stood, out of 3 ballots that were in a vessel on the front of icon of Vladimir, Mother of God, Metropolitan Vladimir of Kiev announced that Metropolitan Tikhon is a new elected Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia. In accepting the will of the council, now Patriarch Tikhon referred to the scroll that the prophet Ezekiel had to eat, on which was written lamentations, mourning, and woe. He foresaw that his ministry would be filled with affliction and tears, but through all his suffering he remained the same accessible and kind hierarch. All who met Saint Tikhon were surprised by his accessibility, simplicity, and modesty. His gentle disposition did not prevent him from showing firmness in church matters. However, particularly when he had to defend the church from her enemies. He bore a very heavy cross. He had to administer and direct the church amidst wholesale church disorganization, without auxiliary administrative body, and in conditions that were surrounded with schismatics, inner church conflicts, and various attacks from the secular authorities. It was a schism of renovationists. It was a schism of people gathering, people being self-proclaimed hierarchy, and so-called new autocephalous churches were kind of that not written, uncanonical new so-called autocephalous churches were attempted to be organized. And of course, Bolshevik government supported all of this turmoils in the church, and Saint Tikhon had to deal with all of this as a patriarch of all Russian Empire. The situation was complicated by external circumstances. The change of the political system by the accession to power of the godless regime by hunger and civil war. This was a time when church property was being confiscated, when clergy and faithful were arrested and killed without trials. At a crucial time for the church, his embellishment name was a bright beacon pointing the way to the truth of orthodoxy. In his message, he called on people to fulfill the commandments of Christ and to attain spiritual rebirth through repentance. His love was felt by all people. In order to save thousands of lives and to improve the general position of the church, the Patriarch took measures to prevent clergy from making purely political statements. On September 25, 1919, when the Civil War was at its highest peak, he issued a message to the clergy urging them to stay away from political struggle. The summer of 1921 brought a severe famine, as we know in history, to the Volga region. In August, Patriarch Tikhon issues a message to the Russian people and to the people of the world, calling them to help famine victims. He gave his blessing for voluntary donations of a church valuables which were not directly used in services. In liturgical services, he prayed for the victims. However, the state on February 23, 1922, so-called All-Russian Central Executive Committee published a decree making all valuables of church valuables subject to confiscation. According to the canonical law, this was absolutely not appropriate, and Patriarch could not approve such total confiscation, especially since many doubted that these valuables would be used to combat the famine. But this statement that Patriarch made, his message was viewed as a sabotage, for which he was imprisoned from April 1922 until June 1923. His Holiness Patriarch Tikhon did much on behalf of the Russian Orthodox Church during the crucial time of the so-called renovationist schism or obnovlenцы. He showed himself to be a faithful servant and custodian of entrusted to him Orthodox Church. He was called, the canonical clergy was called Tikhonovцы, as state of a Bolshevik regime supported schismatic churches. When renovationist priests and hierarchs repented and returned to the church, they were met with tenderness of Saint Tikhon. This, however, did not represent any devotion from his strictly Orthodox policy. I ask you to believe me that I will not come to agreement or make concessions with, which could lead to the loss of purity and strength of orthodoxy, the Patriarch said in 1924. Being a good pastor who devoted his life entirely to the church's cause, he called upon the clergy to do the same. It was extremely painful and hard for the Patriarch's loving, responsive heart to endure all the church's misfortunes. Upheavals in and outside the church, the renovationists, schismatics, his primatial labors, his concern for the organization and tranquility in the church, sleepless nights, and heavy thoughts had its effect on a hierarch's health. And in 1924, Patriarch Tikhon began to feel unwell. He was checked into the hospital, but would leave hospital for Sundays and feast days in order to conduct the services. On Sunday, April 5th, 1925, he served his last liturgy and died 2 days later. On March 25th, the Patriarch received Metropolitan Peter and had a long talk with him. In the evening, the Patriarch slept a little when he woke up and asked what time it was. When he was told it was 11:45 p.m., he made the sign of the cross twice and said, "Glory to thee, O Lord, glory to thee." He did not have time to cross himself a third time, and he fell asleep in the Lord. Almost 1 million people came to say farewell to Patriarch. The large cathedral of the Donskoy monastery in Moscow could not contain the crowd which overflowed the monastery property. Saint Tikhon, the 11th Patriarch of Moscow, was a primate of the Russian Church for 7.5 years. On September 26, 1989, the Council of Bishops of the Russian Orthodox Church glorified Patriarch Tikhon and numbered him among the saints. For nearly 70 years, Saint Tikhon's relics were believed to be lost. But in February 1992, they were discovered in a place in the Donskoy monastery. About this event, I would recommend you to read the book Everyday Saints, written by Metropolitan Tikhon Shevkunov. Metropolitan Tikhon Shevkunov was personally involved into finding the relics of Saint Tikhon, Patriarch of Moscow. And a reason why they were, one of the confusions was that shortly after the death of Patriarch Tikhon, schismatic metropolitan appeared in the investments that Saint Tikhon was buried in. And therefore, lots of people were just thinking that schismatics, like this obnovlenцы, they basically stole his body, and therefore vestment was worn by their metropolitan. But in fact, I mean, like, it was a copy that was made by the same store that sold the vestments for Patriarch Tikhon to this other character, and in fact, when relics of Saint Tikhon's were discovered, he wore the very vestments that he was buried in. It would be Difficult to imagine the Russian Orthodox Church without Patriarch Tikhon during those years. He did so much for the Church and for the strengthening of the faith itself during those difficult years of trial. And perhaps the saint's own words can be sum up his life. May God teach every one of us to strive for his truth and for the good of the Holy Church, rather than something for our own sake. It is also will be difficult to imagine the Orthodox Church in America without Saint Tikhon. Saint Tikhon was saint that envisioned that united Orthodox, independent, autocephalous Orthodox Church will be flourishing in North American land. It was his vision. It was, and what we received as a gift in 1970, as a gift of independence and self-governance, was a much a result of Saint Tikhon's labors. It was incarnation of his vision. Of course, we are still far from that perfect vision that he had, when all of us will be united and it will be only one canonical jurisdiction in this land. It's still ahead of us, but that day will also come. By our labors here on earth and by his prayers on the front of a heavenly altar in the heavenly Jerusalem. Dear brothers and sisters, many miracles are assigned or dedicated to the prayers of Saint Nicholas, Saint Tikhon. Many his divine holy relics are all over around North America, and in our cathedral we also have a particle of his holy relics. Our tradition of our church is to vest our primates into the vestments of Saint Tikhon. So every metropolitan of Orthodox Church in America, in the day of his intronization, is being vested in a vestments that were worn by Saint Tikhon as a sign of continuity, as a sign of succession to this brilliant saint, to this brilliant church hierarch. So we pray, and our devotion is very strong to this saint, and he is indeed the apostle to this land, to the people of this land, and all of us should be grateful for him and learn our lessons, how to be a true Christian in this God-beloved country. And indeed, this is a God-beloved country, and we should baptize it with our apostolic evangelical labors, as Apostle Paul calls us to do. Dear brothers and sisters, this will be it for presentation, but now if you like to send your questions, I would really appreciate your involvement, and I'll attempt to answer everything that you ask. The phone number that you can text your message is 818-213-7176, and email rector@hvmla.org, or just use a chat on YouTube, and Father Deacon will pass on the question to me. Anything? Okay. It doesn't look like it is questions. So now our next Pastoral Talks will be in February February 5th, Friday, February 5th. I believe, yes. And the topic will be, we'll look into life of Saint Innocent. Oops, something came in. Life of Saint Innocent, maybe. No. Okay, so God bless you all. I also want to remind you that our services are on a YouTube, being streamed on YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel, but we are serving in the church. People can worship with us, and like most of the people stay outside, but we allow people to come and light the candles and say prayers. So you are more than welcome to come and visit us. Our church opened almost every day. Monday is a day off, but even on Monday somebody's here. So if somebody needs to come to church, you can call or just come, and most likely somebody will be here to let you into the church itself. We also serve a Malabans before our patron saint, patron icon, Mother of God of Rescue of the Perishing. So if you like to give your names for the prayer, you can email email me at my email address, or text me, and we will commemorate your names during the Malabans and the Cathiston Tuesday. So